And I believe that the best for the region is to work together, to be more stronger, and in alliance with the United States, away from these authoritarian regimes. Because what will it bring? What have they bring to Venezuela after all these years? I think Venezuela is the best example for what this influence means, what they can cause, what have caused in Venezuela. Just hunger, destruction of the economy, and the huge, the largest migration crisis that the hemisphere has ever seen. Now, this is under the discussion of international law, but where it was that discussion when Nicolás Maduro is still the presidential elections in 2024.
Hello and welcome. This is Freedom is Not Free, Patriot Alliance channel. My name is Filip Styczyński, and today our special guest is Estefanía Meléndez. Estefanía Meléndez is an associate fellow at the Center for the Study of Democracy, a European public policy institute. A career diplomat, she has served as Venezuela's ambassador to Bulgaria and to several countries in the Western Balkans. She is currently a special advisor at the Center for Strategic Communications of the government of Ukraine. Her work has focused on analyzing Russian influence in Latin America, with particular emphasis on Venezuela, as well as investigating networks of corruption, money laundering, and sanctions evasion linked to the Venezuelan regime. In addition, she is engaged in the development of tools for international conflict resolution and in promoting the role of women as mediators and drivers of sustainable solutions. Hello, Estefanía. It's great having you here.
Thank you very much, Philip, for your invitation.
Estefanía, 1 month passed since Maduro was captured by the US. What is the current situation, political situation of Venezuela?
Yes, Philip, we already have 1 month. It feels like it already passed like 3 months or even more. A lot of things have happened since then, since that day. And well, as you can imagine, the situation is still very complex. But we couldn't imagine to be at this point right now, 1 month ago, maybe. Prior the capturing of Maduro. So everything has dramatically changed in the country. Now we are even having debates about law of amnesty, which we'll see how it will develop. But I think this is a huge step toward eventual transition. But also we have seen the approval of a new hydrocarbon law, because, as you know, now the United States will start to have more business in the oil sector with Venezuela. So they got this law approved very fast, I will say. And the most important highlight about this law, politically speaking, is that it finished completely with the Chavez era, as we knew it, For the Chavismo, this law may be all they criticize before is completely against their ideology they defend for already almost 3 decades. And this law actually finished somehow, even from the years 1976, when Venezuela nationalized the oil industry, because there are many changes that will, let's say, put this law, the oil sector in a more open markets. Now they allow external investment to produce and to sell by themselves the oil, something that was not possible before. So we'll see. Now we are still trying to understand how everything will be executed on time. It is still a process ongoing that will be temporarily or not, but there are huge changes already.
So Trump said that Venezuela will be ruled by the US and his government. So what does it mean, and does it make you worried about the future of Venezuela?
Well, right now I wish it will be wrong by them somehow. This is not as I see it. I think they actually influence a lot. There is a lot of pressure coming from the US, and without this pressure, we couldn't see these changes going. But anyway, the officials from the regime continue to rule the country. They are the one that's supposed to, well, execute these agreements that they have reached with the U.S. administration. And well, for the people of Venezuela, we expect that these changes will bring a benefit for the population. It's something that we do not really expect from the regime. So for us, the leadership, let's say, from the United States is essential to make it happen. In the same time, well, repression, even when it looks like it's sustained, it is still there. The civil liberties are not all completely open. We are just starting this process, at least it's what it looks like. But you know, they can have these legal changes like this law, but for the long term, let's say to start to see a change on that. Well, in Venezuela, you need to rebuild the rule of law, all of it. So it's not just about one law, or it has to be a massive change. So we understand that it can be a long process, but well, it's starting for us. As I said, the leadership of the United States is what will guarantee somehow that this will be reached. The United States has reopened their embassy in Caracas this week, which I see as a good step toward this plan. They appointed an ambassador, well, not with ambassador title yet, but she is the one, Laura Dawn. She's the one who will, let's say, be communicating directly with regime officials, and they have a clear agenda. Secretary Marco Rubio, he made a hearing before the Senate last week, and he was very clear about that. Now we are in stabilization phase to get a recovery phase, and eventually to start to build this transition to democracy. So all these changes that we have been seeing are part of this stabilization, phase. We'll see.
You mentioned the rule of law, but there was a lot of cries internationally about the violation of the international law by the US after Delta Force captured Maduro and transferred him to the United States. What is your answer to this kind of criticism?
Yeah, well, we have seen a lot of this kind of comments regarding the violation in the international law in these actions in Venezuela. I believe that just the fact that it happened this way tells that the international law itself has been failing for many years, because now this is under the discussion of international law, but where it was that discussion when Nicolás Maduro is still the presidential elections in 2024, just to talk about a specific event, because these not only violated the international law, it violated the sovereignty of the country, because sovereignty resides on the people, and the people decision for their future. So international law supposed to be to protect the people, not to protect regimes. And I feel that actually this argument right now is to protect regime, not the people, because if it will be like that, it they will not allow Nicolás Maduro to steal the election, and they will not consider Nicolás Maduro as a president, which he's not. He didn't was. So, but Nicolás Maduro had plenty of opportunities to leave the power, to respect the will of the Venezuelan people, uh, as this election outcome. But he decided to stay in power by force. But even after that, the United States, since the President Trump arrival and the second administration, they start having channels of communication with Nicolás Maduro. I even remember the first visit that they made with which Richard Grenell, Ambassador Richard Grenell, which is the special envoy of President Trump for, key conflicts. He went to Caracas. It was just after, I think, less of a month that President Trump took office. So they start to have negotiations, communication. There were plenty of opportunities, but Nicolás Maduro decided his own fate. He rejected all these opportunities. Even it was said that countries such as Turkey, even Russia, even the Vatican were participating, trying to find a country where Nicolás Maduro could go to exile and allow a transition to start. And he said no. So let's remember that Nicolás Maduro, some people call him president, but not Venezuelans. He had an indictment in the United States, but not from some few months ago, for years already. And he have a reward, $50 million. I mean, it has the highest reward that the United States have issued on someone. He was even categorized as a narco-terrorist, even on that level. So when it's about that level for the United States, this interest, because it put a threat on their national security, these interests are under the international law for them. So we can say he had plenty of opportunities, and this was only the consequence of his own decisions.
One of the countries that raised this criticism regarding international law and violation of it by the US was Russia. Estefania, you're an expert in the research on Russian influence in South America. Can you tell us more about the ties between Maduro regime and Russia?
Well, I believe it's very ironic coming from Russia, such a statement. Expected, but still ironic, because they are the one that has been violating the international law. They were the one who actually broke this rule-based order, as we knew it, based on the UN Charter, when they decide to invade Ukraine. And every day they are the one who are violating the international law. In Ukraine, as we see, this is not just a war where they target military position, they target specifically civil population. We see it even now. So I believe that Russia for sure should not have a voice on that. They will for sure work on their propaganda. But what we have seen, well, Russia had a lot of influence on the regime in Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua. They have, open doors there. But the fact that this happened, how it happened, also brings us a reflection about how strong was really Russia. Well, we see it in the front in Ukraine. They struggle in the war. That's why they attack the civil population with terror. But they were not able to help Nicolás Maduro. They were not able to help in Syria, for example, when Assad had to run away, and many examples like this. During the capture of Nicolás Maduro, we couldn't see that all these anti-aerial systems, Russian anti-aerial system, and all those weapons that they were promoting so much of their security in Venezuela, it didn't work at all, completely. They didn't shoot back. It was not apparently any intelligence cooperation on this matter. So we see that this is actually merely propaganda and for sure corruption. I think this is the main point to see here, because over the years, especially since 2007, Venezuela has signed a lot of strategic agreements with Russia, and which means there were a lot of money on the table, supposed to reinforce their security, their military capabilities, trainings, modernization of this equipment. And when you see how the Russian ambassador to Venezuela comments, he said that the militaries in Venezuela didn't know to use these weapons. But it says, it shows treatment on this agreement. So what happened with all this agreement, with all the money that was on the table for this? They just steal it. It was just corruption. Again, is another sign of corruption. They didn't do what they're supposed to do. But in the end, it was good. But they still owe this money.
But do you think it can have any impact on Russia domestically or weaken their international position? The change of the government in Venezuela?
I believe that Russian right now, well, they are unable to influence some strategic actions. I believe their position right now is just about propaganda, political narrative, but not on the ground. They have been very affected. But this is just the reflect of their position globally. They do not have actually strength. They will use what happened as a narrative in the UN, and that's all probably. Secretary Rubio has been very clear about Venezuela being a place where all the US adversaries have special access, and include for sure Russia as one of them. So for them, I suppose they were trying to not to lose these strategic assets they have in Venezuela. But definitely the situation has dramatically changed for them. And I see this process as a victory for the free world, for democracy, and a failure for authoritarianism is definitely countering their influence in the Western Hemisphere. And definitely after Nicolás Maduro capturing, this hemisphere is a bit more safer.
Still, there are other countries that are under extreme pressure, not only from Russia, but also from Communist China, Taiwan, for instance. can you tell us more about this part of the cultural and ideological conflict in which we are now as the Western world, more about the threat from communism itself, and why we still need to fight against it, even 30 years after USSR collapse?
Yes, we see in the world that authoritarian regimes are, is increasing. But right now, what just happened after Maduro, and it's something that this has been, happening in the Western Hemisphere, is a shift of this power competition. We have been observing that in all the Americas, right now, with different countries that have been having presidential elections, this pendulum is now going more to the right wing and to trying to reinforce alliance with the United States. We see it in Chile, we see it even in Bolivia. We just recently saw it in Costa Rica just last week. And where we saw it in Argentina, we have President Milei that is trying to get a very strong alliance with the United States. We even saw President Petro meeting with Donald Trump, even after all what they have said and the tensions with Colombia. And he was in Washington just a couple of days ago. So they're trying to normalize their relation and will try to find a cooperation. So I believe this is the moment where the United States have been very clear about how they want to project their influence, because we are coming from plenty of years where the Western Hemisphere has been, left aside on the United States priorities. What that caused that you have an increasing of the United States adversaries in the region using these countries such as Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua as the door to enter and to expand. With China, we saw it. Of course, they were more into this economic, financial help to plenty of countries. For example, in Chile, China is the main economic partner. So right now, I believe the United States have been so clear that this influence should finish as they are right now. We saw it when President Donald Trump took office. They had to control the Panama Channel because it was completely captured by Chinese influence. And this is something that they see it, and it is translated as a threat to their national security. So all these steps are, making this change. And I believe that the best for the region is to work together, to be more stronger, and in alliance with the United States, away from these authoritarian regimes. Because what will it bring? What have they bring to Venezuela after all these years? I think Venezuela is the best example for what this influence means, what they can cause, what have caused in Venezuela. Just hunger, destruction of the economy, and the huge, the largest migration crisis that the hemisphere has ever seen. Today we are 9 million of Venezuela abroad. This is a crisis that is very difficult for me to explain you the impact that it has, not only for Venezuela after all these people have flee the country, but for the countries around. So is destruction what they bring, and I think this is a right moment to understand what are the alliance that will help the people, that where will benefit the people. And it's a great moment for the region to work together to get more stronger.
And what is the current situation of the Venezuelan opposition? What is your prediction for the future election? Because you already had your democratic election, right, a few years ago. So, what's your thinking on this issue?
Yes, well, this month, as I told you, many things has happened. One of them is the meeting between our Democratic leader, Maria Corina Machado, with President Donald Trump in the White House. This for opposition has been a very important meeting because they haven't met before in person. And it seems that President Donald Trump got a great impression from Maria Corina, and they're willing to work together. She could explain better, what her position. She is very open about that. And it's clear that she just don't have the support from Trump administration, but also as I've seen in the last day, is the support that is bipartisan. Even Democratic Party support this democratic transition to Venezuela as Republicans do it, and everyone is aware that it's a long process because they want to do it in a way that avoid the risk of increase the violence, to get an armed conflict in the country. And I believe it's a path that could work. It needs, as I said, a lot of cooperation. But I believe that right now, the United States, as I said, is focused on this stabilization process. They need to guarantee this influence on the administration of Delcy Rodriguez. I mean, let's remember that they are regime senior officials. But we have seen, and by the words of President Donald Trump, they have been cooperating a lot. So for opposition, for us, obviously, we do not trust Delcy Rodriguez. And it's not that we are not doing something in this stage. We understand that right now this is so complex process. They need to work together, and then it will come the moment when the opposition can come back because it's mostly in exile. We are now focused on the releasing of all political prisoners. Phillips, after the presidential elections, it was more than 2,000 people that were in jail because of, reclaiming the victory of Edmundo Gonzalez. And cases that I have to tell you, horrible cases, even killings among them. So for us right now, this is like a priority to get all these political prisoners released, free and safer. And we understand that it will come a moment where the country will be secure, as all these people will come back to Venezuela and start to get more political influence. And I mean by that civil liberties, and not that we just go to Venezuela and we go to jail. So it's a long process. We have been patient. We understand that in one day to another, these things will not change. But already in 1 month, a lot of things has happened that we couldn't even think in 2 months ago. So opposition for sure. And Maria Corina is like our democratic compass. She has massive support among all Venezuelans inside the country that they cannot say it loudly, still not, and abroad. All these 9 million, show you probably 90% of them, as it will show in the primaries that we celebrate in 2023, that we choose Maria Corina to represent us on that election, but they didn't allow her to run. And this primaries, she won with 92% of the voting, and most of this voting was abroad, was in outside of Venezuela, and as well inside. So we trust her. This is where I can tell you we really trust Maria Corina. And just the fact that she exists, it makes Venezuelan case not as Iraq that many people say. It is not, because the Venezuelan people is very determined on their values and what they want for their future, which is democracy. And Maria Corina is just the representation of all of it. So we know we need to be patient, but it will come. This transition, even when it hasn't officially started, because you need to see, some pace to start, is irreversible. It will come. There is not a way to go back.
So this is what I wish for you and to all Venezuelan people. Last question. You spent years countering authoritarian and communist propaganda, both in South America and now in Europe. For our Taiwanese audience, now Taiwan is under constant propaganda attacks and cognitive and psychological operations from communist China. What are the best ways to fight with this kind of influence, and how to deter it?
Yeah, I believe the position of Taiwan is very complicated, but judging by the last event in China, there is a kind of purge inside them made by President Xi. We still do not know how this will develop. It seems that he even himself is moving forward to be more and more authoritarian. I think this is a situation that can have different outcomes. I believe it's still early to understand how it will develop, but it will have for sure a lot of impact on these intentions with Taiwan. I believe, of course, their allies is United States, and they should, of course, be with them, negotiate with them, and make them be by their side. As I tell you, as Venezuelan, we have been fighting this regime already for 27 years. We use all the tools that democratic give us to fight them. At some point, obviously, it was not enough. Taiwan has other capabilities for sure. But if you compare it with China, it's still not that much capabilities. But you also can compare it with Ukraine and Russia. That nobody believed that Ukraine will stand that much longer. But as I say, Ukraine haven't done this alone. They have alliance. The role of Europe have been very important, and of course the role of the United States. So no country can just fight against these superpowers alone, especially if it's a little country. It needs alliance. It needs people that believe on their rights of self-determination, that they use, this authoritarian, they use this flag of self-determination alone, but it's just propaganda, because many of them may not respect that self-determination, if not that what they believe to be. So I understand, as I said, it's complex, but you need to work together with the countries that believe in yourself. Is the only way.
Thank you, Estefania, and thank you for this message. Estefanía Meléndez was our guest. Thank you so much. And please keep us updating with the situation in Venezuela. And we wish all the best to Venezuela and to its people. Thank you.